Hey, good afternoon. It's Garret Biss. I hope you're having an awesome day today, a great afternoon. I wanted to do another video and continue the discussion on the spheres approach, specifically the message of the spheres approach to happiness and fulfillment. It's a message I share in my book, and I wanted to talk today about taking some of the things that we've addressed in previous videos and how you can actually apply it in your life to experience that happiness and that fulfillment that you want and that we all deserve. So the spheres approach, real quick recap, the way the term the spheres approach describes the way I envision the world is comprised of three concentric spheres. We reside in the middle of that, and the experience that we have of life is every event or circumstance that we face occurs in one of three spheres. The largest sphere being the indirect sphere, that's everything that doesn't directly affect us. But these are things that can affect us and can weigh on our mind and can influence the way that we show up and the way that we engage in those things that we do need to address, that are on our plate, those things that are important to us. The next sphere is everything that does directly affect us. Those are the things, things that show up for us, the things that we need to either react or respond to. If something happens in your life, if you face an obstacle, a challenge in your life, and it's something that you need to react or respond to, that would be something that's in the direct sphere. And then the smallest sphere is the action sphere, and that's the things that we do that influence the world around us. The things that the people that we influence, the things that we influence around us, the ways that we interact with or communicate with those on a daily basis. That's our action sphere. That's the way that we show up, and that's the way that we influence and affect the world around us. So the last couple of videos we've been talking about universal laws, and I mentioned universal laws. We covered 7 different ones, and I described them as tools that you can use to either, one, find the positive in every event or circumstance that's presented to you, find ways to be empowered by the challenges that you face. And I also think of universal laws as a way to view life events and circumstances, much like having a lens to look through, to look at any event or circumstance in your life to find the positive that can come from it. We talked about vibration. We talked about relativity, saying that nothing's either good or bad unless we compare it with something else. We talked about polarity and how every negative that we experience in our life comes with it the seeds of something equal and opposite, so some positive. We talked about cause and effect and the energy that we put out affecting or influencing the energy of those people around us. We talked about rhythm and how there's a natural rhythm to everything that happens in life and the periods in our life. And when things are really challenging and hard, we know that soon those problems or that frustration will pass and times will get better. Similarly, when times are really good, we need to understand that we will face challenges in the future, so we need to continue to prepare for those. And we talked about gender and how everything that manifests in our life or comes to fruition in our life takes a certain amount of time to manifest. And lastly, we talk about transmutation of energy, and that's taking things that really upset or anger or frustrate us or enrage us and using that inspiration or that energy to inspire us to take action that will create positive change. Today I want to talk about really how we use these, or how these will kind of show up in our life. It's one thing to look at each law individually and understand the concept individually, but now that we go out into our world and experience our life, and how do we apply these things, and how's this going to show up for us? So the way that I talk about in the book is I take some military reference to a term called OODA loop, and it's in our normal vernacular, so I'm sure you've heard the term before. And if you're not aware, this is actually, I believe, the term was coined first in military reference by Colonel Boyd, who was an Air Force officer. And he coined this term OODA loop to talk about the cognitive process that people go through between events or circumstances showing up in their life and then the actions that they take. And if you're not familiar, wrote it out on the board. So OODA loop. So when something happens in our life, when we face an event or a circumstance or something comes up in our life, we observe that thing that happened. I keep talking about the flat tire on the way home from work, or on the way to work or school in the morning. If you have a flat tire, that's an event that happens. That's something you observe. When somebody comes into the room and they start interacting with you, they might interact in a certain way. That's something that you're observing. When you observe something that's happening in your life or in the world around you, you then orient yourself. So the second O is orient. And you orient yourself to whatever that event is, and how closely it affects you, how it might affect you. Once you've orientated yourself to that event or circumstance, you then decide what possible actions you could take. What are some things that you could do to respond or react to it? And then finally, you decide how you will act and you take an action. Once you take an action, now you're in a new position, and now you'll have to wait and observe for another stimulus or another event to show up in your life. So an example, if you're thinking of, sports reference, so the Super Bowl is coming up. So if you were a quarterback and and the football was snapped to you, now you would look up and you would observe everything that's going on in the world or on the playing field around you. And then if you saw some people coming towards you or some people that were, some linemen that were blocking for you, you would orient yourself to where these people were. Maybe you see a middle linebacker who's coming around, looks like he's going to tackle you. So you orient yourself and realize, okay, he's so far away, it means I have so much time to respond or react, and then you can decide some of your different options. Either I can pass the ball right now, I can move a little bit to one side, and hopefully he'll pass me or won't be able to get to me and tackle me. But you weigh your different options, and then finally you decide what you're going to do. You decide your action, and then you take an action. You either, whatever it was you're going to do, you can either run, you can pass the ball, you can try to miss the middle linebacker so it doesn't tackle you. But once you've taken that action, so say you try to run to escape being tackled by the linebacker, now you're in a different position. Now you see other players on the field. Now you orient yourself. You observe the different people on the field. You orient yourself to where they are. You decide some different things, you look at the different decisions that you can make, and then you take an action. So in our life, when things happen to us, this is how I apply the spheres approach. I think about applying the spheres approach in my life in context of these 7 universal laws. Something happens, we observe what happens. And then by using the universal laws, we can decide how we're relating or how that's going to relate to us. We orient ourselves to whatever that thing was that happened. So the first question would be, is this something that's in the indirect sphere or the direct sphere? Is this something that's going to directly impact my life, or is it something that will not? If I hear about something on the news and it's a tragic event that happened far away, I can think, all right, does this affect me directly? Is this going to affect my job? Is it going to affect my health? Is this going to affect my family? Or is it going to affect anybody that I personally know? And if the answer is no, well, then I would think that would suggest to me that it's something that's in the indirect sphere. Once we understand that it's in the indirect sphere, we orient ourselves, it's in the indirect sphere, we decide that we don't need to take any action for it, therefore we take no action, and we can wait and observe the next event or circumstance in our life. Now let's say we're driving home from work and we observe a bunch of red lights in front of us, a bunch of tail lights in front of us, and we realize that there's a lot of traffic. We orient ourselves to it, decide how far away we are from that traffic, maybe how much traffic there is, how far we are away from home. But we orient ourselves to this event or this circumstance. And then we decide, we look at all the decisions that we can make. Are we gonna just stay on this road and continue home the same way? Are we gonna look for a detour? Are we gonna have to change our plans? Are we gonna have to make some phone calls and let people know that we might be later than expected? And then from those decisions, we pick one action and we act on it. And then we observe again. So with the universal laws, they help us orient ourselves to those things that do happen in our direct sphere. If we can't, once we observe something happen, we can use the universal laws as a lens to observe that event or that circumstance and identify ways that we can see it in a positive light. We can identify ways that it might empower us or good things that can come from it. And from that perspective, we can then decide on an action to take that would create the better future outcome or the better future situation for us. Now, sometimes we say, it's always better to respond to events or circumstances that happen in our life instead of just reacting to it. When I think of reaction, looking at this OODA loop or comparing it to this OODA loop, when I think of action, what that makes me think of is that we have an observation, we observe something that's happening, and then before we even orient ourselves or think about the different decisions, we have a conditioned response and we just take an action. So if we break off this whole cognitive process, this whole ability to really analyze the situation and pick the best action for us, we go from observation to action. It's just a conditioned response. We're not making any decision because it's something that we're conditioned to do, and we're taking an action. And then we're observing again, taking an action. But through that process, we continue to just react to those things that are taking place around us and not deciding the best ways that we can respond to it to create that future outcome. So if you ever think or ever hear the difference between responding and reacting to something, responding is something that you're empowered to do, that empowers you to create change in the future, whereas reaction is just that, it's reactionary. Something happens without thinking about it, you you take a certain action, react in a certain way. And if you don't take that time to think through this process, to orient yourself, to decide the best actions to take, the way that this might influence or affect you, the way that it might influence or affect those around you, look at all the different decisions that you could make, and then choose the correct action, then you're disempowering yourself. You're taking away your ability to create that future outcome for you that you want. So I just thought this was an interesting way to help me think through the process of applying the universal laws and managing my spheres in my life, is going through this OODA loop process. If you're not familiar with it, this is the first time you heard of it, there's a lot of resource online. You can read up a little bit more on it. And obviously in the book, The Spheres Approach, I know this looks backwards on the screen, but The Spheres Approach, I talk in there a little bit more about it. I spend a chapter discussing the OODA loop and how you can apply it in your own life. But I hope you appreciate this video. I hope it gives you some clarity on how you can apply these universal laws in your life and how you can use this spheres approach to really manage yourself and manage the outcomes and deal with those events or circumstances that show up in your life. But I appreciate you checking out the video. If you got something valuable from it, please share. If you have any questions or comments, I look forward to reading them and responding to them. And if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. You have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in the next video.